Before you scroll, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like your mind doesn't belong to just one place? Like part of you is always listening, always connecting dots, always picking up signals that others completely miss? If you're a Gemini, this isn't imagination. And it's not coincidence that you found this video right now. Because today, we're not talking about surface astrology. We're not talking about stereotypes, jokes, or what people think Gemini is. This is about something much deeper. Something ancient. Something intentional. According to spiritual traditions, astrology, and divine symbolism, God didn't distribute talents randomly. Each sign carries a specific frequency, and Gemini was entrusted with abilities that are rare, powerful, and often misunderstood. You see, Gemini is ruled by the realm of the mind, thought, language, perception. But what most people don't realize is that the Gemini mind operates like an antenna. It receives, translates, and transmits information between worlds, the visible and the invisible, the spoken and the unspoken. That's why Gemini often feels too much or too fast for this world. Why silence can feel uncomfortable, yet truth feels unavoidable. Why you can read a room instantly, sense shifts in energy, and understand people before they understand themselves. These aren't accidents. They are talents. In this video, we're going to reveal the 5 divine talents God gave only to Gemini, gifts hidden beneath your curiosity, your duality, your restlessness, and your hunger for meaning. Some of these talents explain why Gemini is often misunderstood. Some explain why Gemini attracts both admiration and resistance. And some explain why Gemini is meant to awaken others, not by force, but by insight. But listen closely. The 5th talent is the one almost no one talks about. It's the reason Gemini can trigger transformation just by speaking. The reason your words can heal or completely dismantle illusions. And the reason many Geminis go through inner conflicts before stepping into their true power. Once you understand this 5th talent, you will never see yourself the same way again. So if you're a Gemini, or if you've ever felt drawn to Gemini energy, stay with me. Because this isn't just information. This is a reminder, a revelation. And for some of you, a calling you felt your entire life, but never had the words to explain. Let's begin. Gemini seems too light to be deep, curious, communicative, always changing. But this is the greatest illusion about this sign. Because behind Gemini's quick mind, there is something much more serious. A consciousness that perceives earlier, understands earlier, and feels earlier than everyone else. And when you're born with this kind of mind, you don't live an ordinary life. You carry talents that few people can sustain. Very few truly understand how Gemini works on the inside. Gemini is not confused. Gemini is not superficial. And it is definitely not unstable by accident. What exists within Gemini is a rare mental architecture, designed to capture signals, translate truths, and connect worlds that don't speak to each other. Today, you're going to discover the 5 talents that God gave only to Gemini. Gifts that explain why this sign thinks differently, feels differently, and lives on a level that many can't keep up with. And stay until the end, because the 5th talent is the one that changes everything. And almost no Gemini realizes they carry it. If this is your first time on the channel, subscribe and like the video. Here, we talk about deep, spiritual, and psychological astrology. Now, let's get into the talents. The mind that translates realities. The first great talent granted to Gemini is invisible to those who observe from the outside, but decisive for those who carry it within, the ability to translate realities. Gemini doesn't just think, it interprets, decodes, and reorganizes the world around it in real time. Its mind works like a living bridge between abstract ideas and concrete understanding, between what is felt and what can be spoken. While many people perceive reality in a linear way, Gemini captures layers. It hears what is said, but also what is avoided. It notices gestures, silences, contradictions, emotional nuances, and subtle shifts in energy. All of this is processed almost instantly by the Gemini mind, which turns complexity into language and chaos into clarity. This talent explains why Gemini is often the one who explains the unexplainable. It finds words for confusing emotions, gives names to sensations others can't express, and translates inner conflicts into conscious understanding. This isn't just communication, it's mediation between inner and outer worlds. That's why Gemini frequently takes on the role of messenger, teacher, writer, informal therapist, or counselor. People feel understood when they talk to Gemini, even if they don't know exactly why. There's something in the way Gemini connects ideas that creates relief, recognition, and clarity. This gift doesn't come from pure intellectual effort, but from a rare mental sensitivity typical of the air sign Gemini. However, this talent also carries a silent weight. Translating realities requires constant attention, presence, and receptivity. Gemini's mind rarely rests because it's always capturing, filtering, and reorganizing information. When Gemini doesn't learn to protect itself energetically, it may experience mental exhaustion, dispersion, or the feeling of carrying thoughts that aren't even its own. The great lesson of this talent is balance. When Gemini understands that it doesn't need to translate everything for everyone, its mind aligns with its highest purpose. It begins to use this gift consciously, choosing when to speak, when to listen, and when to remain silent. At that point, its words gain even more power, precision, and impact. The mind that translates realities is not just a trait of the Gemini personality. It is a spiritual function. It is the gift of making the invisible understandable, of transforming information into consciousness, and of helping others see what was always there, but never clearly perceived. When Gemini honors this talent, it stops fragmenting into 1,000 scattered ideas and begins to become what it was born to be, a channel of understanding between worlds, thoughts, and truths. Accelerated perception of the invisible. The second talent God granted to Gemini is as subtle as it is powerful. Accelerated perception of the invisible. Gemini doesn't see only what's in front of the eyes. It captures what lies beneath. Unspoken intentions, shifts in energy, emotional variations, and almost imperceptible signals are absorbed by the Gemini mind before they become obvious to anyone else. This perception happens at high speed. While many people need time to understand a situation, Gemini has already sensed what is changing, what hasn't been said, and where everything is heading. The Gemini mind works like a continuous radar, scanning environments, people, and contexts. Nothing passes completely unnoticed. That's why Gemini often feels something off before a difficult conversation, anticipates conflicts before they explode, or senses emotional distance before it becomes real. This ability doesn't come from distrust, but from mental and energetic sensitivity. As a true air sign Gemini, it perceives subtle movements in the invisible field, thoughts, intentions, and vibrations that have not yet materialized. This talent explains why silence is rarely neutral for Gemini. It senses when something shifts, even if no one admits it. A different look, a shorter reply, a change in tone is enough to activate its inner reading. The Gemini mind quickly connects these signals and builds a complete picture of what's happening behind the scenes. However, this accelerated perception can also create overload. Because it captures everything, Gemini risks absorbing tensions that don't belong to it. When it doesn't learn how to filter, the mind can enter a constant state of alert, confusing perception with restlessness. That's why many Gemini struggle to fully relax, not because they're anxious, but because they're always attentive. When this talent is used consciously, it turns into wisdom. Gemini learns to trust its mental intuition, using it to make more precise decisions, avoid draining paths, and understand people deeply. It learns to observe without getting lost, to perceive without becoming overwhelmed. Accelerated perception of the invisible is not a common gift. It's an elevated form of consciousness that allows Gemini to anticipate, understand, and adapt before reality shifts. When balanced, this talent becomes a powerful inner compass, guiding Gemini with clarity, discernment, and a deep understanding of what is truly at stake in every situation. This gift is not excess sensitivity. It is vision at spiritual speed. Duality as intelligence, not conflict. The third talent granted to Gemini is perhaps the most misunderstood of all, duality. For a long time, this trait has been labeled as indecision, instability, or contradiction. But in truth, Gemini duality is not a flaw. It is a higher form of intelligence. Gemini doesn't live divided. It lives expanded. While many people perceive the world in binary terms, right or wrong, yes or no, black or white, Gemini sees the layers in between. Its mind can hold opposing ideas at the same time without collapsing. The Gemini mind doesn't need to choose immediately because it understands that reality rarely fits into a single point of view. This ability makes Gemini naturally strategic, adaptable, and analytical. It observes situations from multiple angles before acting. It can understand contradictory motivations, justify complex behaviors, and see connections where others see only confusion. Gemini duality is, in reality, the ability to coexist with multiple truths without losing one's identity. This talent explains why Gemini changes its mind more easily. Not because it is weak or easily influenced, but because new information creates new interpretations. When the scenario changes, the response changes. This mental flexibility is typical of the air sign Gemini, which moves through thought, dynamic logic, and constantly evolving understanding. However, when this duality is not understood, even by Gemini itself, it can generate inner conflict. External pressure to pick a side or always be the same clashes with its expansive nature. The result can be guilt, confusion, or the feeling of never being fully understood. Not because Gemini doesn't know itself, but because few people can keep up with its processing speed. When Gemini matures, it realizes it doesn't need to fragment itself to please others. It learns to integrate its multiple perspectives into a broader, more coherent vision. At this stage, duality stops being dispersion and becomes higher clarity. Gemini begins to use this ability to mediate conflicts, build bridges between opposites, and offer solutions no one else can see. Gemini duality is not conflict, it is consciousness in motion. It is the talent of understanding that two seemingly opposite ideas can, in fact, be part of the same greater truth. When honored, this intelligence makes Gemini a rare thinker, a deep communicator, and a lucid interpreter of human complexity. Gemini was not born to be simple. It was born to be complete across multiple dimensions. The word as a tool of transformation. The fourth talent granted to Gemini is one of the most powerful and, at the same time, the most dangerous when used without awareness: the word. For Gemini, language is not just a means of communication, it is an instrument of transformation. Its words don't merely pass through an environment, they activate processes. They awaken, reorganize, confront, and in many cases heal. The Gemini mind does not speak from empty impulse. Before speech, there is reading. Gemini senses the context, the present emotion, the exact timing, and the sensitive point. When the word emerges, it carries precision. That's why a single sentence spoken by Gemini can bring deep relief to someone or trigger a necessary rupture. It's no exaggeration to say that Gemini plants mental seeds through language. This talent explains why people remember what Gemini said years later. Its words stay. They echo because they touch something essential. As a true air sign Gemini, it operates in the realm of thought, ideas, and consciousness. Gemini's speech doesn't act only in the present. It projects into the future, influencing decisions, perceptions, and paths. However, this gift demands responsibility. When Gemini speaks without inner alignment, its words can wound more than it realizes. Irony, sarcasm, or truths delivered without emotional preparation can destabilize the listener and Gemini itself. Many Geminis carry guilt for having said too much or spoken too soon, precisely because their words carry real force. That's why the maturation of this talent involves conscious silence. Gemini must learn that it doesn't need to speak all the time, only when the word has purpose. When this understanding settles in, communication stops being scattered and becomes surgical. Every sentence gains weight. Every dialogue becomes an opportunity for genuine transformation. This talent manifests in many forms: writing, teaching, public speaking, therapy, art, and conflict mediation. Gemini has the ability to reorganize another person's mind through language, helping them see what was previously confused, repressed, or unconscious. For Gemini, the word is energy shaped into sound. When used with awareness, it doesn't merely inform, it awakens. This gift was not given to convince, manipulate, or dominate, but to illuminate, liberate, and expand. When Gemini honors the power of its own voice, it stops speaking just to be heard and begins speaking to transform. And in that moment, its word becomes exactly what it was meant to be: a catalyst for consciousness. The rarest gift, awakening consciousness. The fifth talent granted to Gemini is the rarest, the deepest, and also the most challenging to sustain: the gift of awakening consciousness. This is not a visible talent, nor something Gemini can activate at will. It manifests naturally, often without intention, through presence, the right word at the exact moment, or a simple question that changes everything. Gemini doesn't awaken people through imposition, authority, or emotional force. It awakens through clarity. In conversation with a Gemini, something reorganizes internally. Beliefs are questioned, patterns begin to collapse, and old ideas lose their meaning. Many people leave conversations with Gemini transformed without knowing exactly why. This is the effect of the Gemini mind operating at its highest frequency. This gift explains why Gemini often provokes intense reactions throughout life. Some people feel deeply inspired by it, others feel strangely uncomfortable. Awakening consciousness is not always comfortable because it requires seeing truths that were being avoided. And Gemini, as a true air sign Gemini, operates precisely in the field of perception and awareness. However, this talent comes with inner conflicts. Many Geminis go through long periods feeling like they don't fully belong anywhere. There's a recurring sense of being one step ahead, thinking about things the environment hasn't reached yet. This can lead to loneliness, dispersion, or the attempt to shrink oneself to fit into spaces that can't keep up. Before awakening others, Gemini must pass through its own awakening process, questioning its identities, integrating its duality, and accepting its mental and spiritual mission. When this alignment occurs, the gift stops being a burden and becomes purpose. Awakening consciousness doesn't mean convincing or correcting. It means opening inner doors. Gemini does this by offering new perspectives, naming what was confused, and inviting others to think for themselves. It doesn't deliver ready-made answers. It activates unavoidable questions. This talent also explains why Gemini rarely lives an ordinary life. Its presence creates movement. Wherever it goes, something shifts. People begin to think differently, see differently, and feel differently. Even when Gemini leaves, the impact remains. The gift of awakening consciousness is silent, but irreversible. Once activated, there is no return to the previous state. And when Gemini accepts this calling, it stops fragmenting into 1,000 versions of itself and begins to act as what it has always been, a catalyst for expansion, lucidity, and awareness. This is the talent that surprises, and also the one that reveals who Gemini truly is. Gemini was not born to be understood by everyone. It was born to connect, translate, and awaken. Its mind is not restless. It is expansive. And when Gemini understands who it truly is, it stops dispersing and begins to illuminate paths, including its own. If you've made it this far, I truly want to thank you for listening to this message with attention and presence. Nothing that was said came by chance. If these words touch something inside you, it's because this message was meant for you at the right time in the right way. Now, I want to ask you something simple, but very important. If this message resonated with you, confirm receipt by writing the number 0303 in the comments. This number symbolizes alignment, awareness, and confirmation that you are ready to hear it. And if you feel that this kind of content helps you understand yourself better, awaken, and evolve, join our channel. Subscribe, activate notifications, like the video, and share it with someone you feel also needs to receive this message. Every subscription, every like, and every comment strengthens this energy and allows more people to awaken to who they truly are. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being part of this frequency.